Good morning, good morning, good morning.
All right. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Good. Monica's under the weather, but so it was all dad all time yesterday. But
That means yesterday was a full day.
full day, full nighttime, full bath time, full dinner time, full playtime. But so speaking of that, I think we talked about it offline, but online, Monica and I are expecting our second. We're
Yeah,
joining. A little girl will be joining the family.
that's awesome. What's the deadline?
Deadline draft date join the team is end of March. There's no official date. But
Eh, End
March
of
28th.
March. So you had the baby in March, first couple weeks of April. Trying to think like what's good like on TV around that time to have an infant in your arms just watching. It's golf season starting pretty
Yeah, it can
much.
be golf season. It's gonna be walk season. It's gonna be a lot of stroller
Oh
walks.
yeah. Spring walks. That's solid.
You know what? It's not gonna be watch. It's gonna be listen. It's gonna be a lot of like Dan Carlin, Hardcore
Oh, okay.
History,
Yeah.
long walk podcasts.
Count me in for that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'm guessing we'll do a little sports recap at the end. I don't think we want to get into this. Isn't the forum for really politics. Election last night. Happy
Yeah.
it's over. Um, you want to get into it? What's it with you?
Yeah, let's hop into Blood and Thunder first, and then we'll catch up at the end.
All right, awesome. Quick synopsis on Blood and Thunder by Hampton Sides, published in 2006. Blood and Thunder, an epic of the American West by Hampton Sides, is a historical narrative that chronicles the tumultuous history of the American West, focusing on the life of Christopher Kit Carson, a frontiersman, and the border conflicts between the Native American tribes and white settlers. The book weaves together the stories of exploration, Indian wars, and the expansion of the United States in the 19th century.
That synopsis is pretty accurate. It does not account for what I thought was the boringness of a lot of this book.
Okay, well, you got to blame ChatGPT for that because usually I write the synopsises. Today I was rolling out of bed and just ChatGPT'd it.
Yeah, now and that is exactly what you want your synopsis to be if you wrote this book and are having people out there reading it, because there were parts of it that were exciting and adventurous and all that kind of stuff, but I found most of it to be a tough read, pretty snoozer.
Maybe this is how I read, but I kind of glom on to certain parts of books. Certainly, this happened with Hunt for October. I liked every part with Jack Ryan, other parts with other subs or, other characters didn't love as much. It certainly happens when I read Game of Thrones where I love one character's point of view and then a Brienne chapter, I'm like, can't get through it fast enough where I'm like, just get back to something much better. Anything with Kit Carson, I was in. And then there's like politicking of the of the Native American reservations
And there was a lot. There was a lot of that. Like this was a story of Kit Carson. It really wasn't. And I guess part of that is because we're talking about what? Almost 200 years ago, roughly.
Yeah, it was the 1840s.
In the American West, where these guys are not walking around with tape recorders or pen and pencils highlighting things.
Yeah.
So it is all word of mouth that is really, really stretched. And I feel like this author didn't want to take too many steps to exaggerate things.
Yeah. Well, they talk about it, those little novellas or whatever.
Books, yeah.
Basically comic books of the era about a real life Kit Carson. It's kind of cool.
It's very cool.
Like this is because those are all being published out east, and there's this real man living this life. And I think he had a line like, I don't remember it, but doesn't mean it wasn't true or something like that. He's like kind of downplaying it, but
and he, winked at whoever it was. Yeah.
That was one of the last chapters. So again, I like the Kit Carsons, which is usually, again, if we're kind of breaking up into quarters, I like this definitely more than you did. But first quarter, second quarter were pretty good. First half was good. Third quarter was poor, really dragged down. It could have cut a lot out of the third. And then when you get back to the fourth quarter, about that last fight at that like decrepit fort
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
Yes.
And then
that was like, it was like 5 minutes of reading that last fight.
yeah. Well, it's like multiple charges, and they're making
Yeah,
the last
no,
stand
that
in
was
abandoned
good.
fort, and
Yeah, my thought is that just the gaps between the good, like easy reads where you're engulfed in it were quick, and then everything else was just paper filler. A lot of it. I did find some of the stuff interesting about like the US presidential influence on the West. Like I've never thought about President Polk before.
yeah,
And yet that little
Zachary
chapter
Taylor.
about him kind of opened things up. That was pretty cool because I could get into that. There wasn't that much. And then in
That's really
terms
a
of
lost era of American history.
yeah,
Early 1800s.
I feel like there wasn't like writing or, like I said, note taking or tape recorders. It just didn't seem like as much of a thing. And I don't know why, because it seemed like in the late 1700s, we have like countless letters and diaries and all that kind of stuff from all the presidents.
Yeah, well, maybe in the 1700s it's just more stationary. And
Yeah,
then this
everyone
time
was in the
they're
same spot. If you needed to get from New
itinerant.
York to Philadelphia or New Jersey to Philadelphia, you could do so.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're trying to get letters from, Santa Fe, New Mexico to Washington, D.C., and there are raiders constantly. So you got like a 30% chance of even getting there. And then it's a month old by the time it does. Yeah, it's just a different time.
And there's one man doing 6-day journeys. 4 horses die on the journey. How many horses died in this book? 200?
Horses, oxes, and mules were just slaughtered throughout the book. And I actually feel bad about that, thinking about it. It is pretty awful to think that.
Yeah, there's that scene when Kit Carson's getting ridden down by some Comanches, and then this galloping away slices the throat of his mule, gets under it and uses it as a barricade, and then fires from it as a defensive position. I was like, that's a scene from a movie, but it's also just shows you how gruesome.
Yeah, that I will say is one thing you could really take away from this book is in terms of history, like the American West is probably one of the most brutal endeavors people have ever had.
Yeah, that whole when they had that little band of American soldiers on that hilltop, and then Kit Carson needs to make the barefoot escape over to San Diego, which is 20 miles away or whatever.
You get one of those little like cactus things in your foot, you're down for the count.
Yeah, I'm out. Tag me out.
And he and the 2 guys, like they were so beat up from that, like it affected them for their lives. It wasn't like they were just tired after a football game and they needed a night off. Yeah, those are like some incredible stories that happened. It seemed like all the time over there. It was just like commonplace, along with like kidnappings was totally commonplace. Like you wake up and your wife and kids are gone. It was just totally common.
Yeah, there's that story about the husband and wife and daughter who went out in front of the pack, like the White family.
The last name, like Angela White, or
yeah,
I think it was White. Yeah.
And Kit track. I love how they talk about how he's an expert tracker.
Yeah, I just feel like they don't have enough about Kit Carson because he didn't allow it. I don't think he kept the diary. It doesn't seem like he really talked to people. He gave one like firsthand account of his storytelling or his background, and it seemed to be limited.
Yeah. It just seems like he was kind of a demure, reserved guy.
Yeah,
but he just did so much and accomplished so much that his legend got out. I kind of respect that. Like the legend gets out without you promoting it.
Yeah, definitely.
I thought that was super cool.
I mean, the legend definitely got out, but at the same time, before reading this book, I knew next to nothing about Kit Carson. Like, yeah, there's a city named after him, but that's about it.
No, and he's not Daniel Boone. He's not Davy Crockett. Sam Houston. So I kind of like that he wrote the book just like, hey, this guy should be mentioned along those names, and I definitely think he should be. He's definitely he's definitely an elite frontiersman.
Yeah, I mean the story of, if you want to call it the American West, is probably pretty indebted to him. You talk about the things in the book, the influence he had at that time, because we're saying, hey, yeah, he's He's not that popular now, but back then it seemed like he was a superstar,
Yeah.
and his stories led people out west, which kind of made things the way they are today. But I just feel like there just wasn't sufficient information about him. There wasn't enough people writing stories about him, or he wasn't allowing it to be, or you couldn't catch up with him because he was running around the American West for months and years at a time.
Yeah. I mean, he spends no time at home in
No.
house in the field.
And
He
if it
just
was
wants to
funny
get back
too.
home to his wife. I'm like, has he seen his wife in 2.5 years?
Yeah, and talk about kids too. Every time he was popping up, he was just like, and she's pregnant again.
And he's 50 years old.
I think the last kid was born not long before he died, right?
No, him and his wife died like a month apart.
Yeah, and the kid wasn't too long.
And she died in childbirth. She died
Like
in
a few
complications
weeks
from
after, I
childbirth.
think they said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a crazy life.
Yeah.
It shows you like, oh man, having kids now is tough. And then you're like, at least there's not Navajo raids and famines and droughts.
No.
And my country's not civil war, and I'm asked to fight. And
It's just like a normal day too. Like, oh honey, the Indians got into the garden again, took everything we own. Luckily the kids are still here.
yeah, that stuff. I do appreciate kind of reading stories like that about hardship, and definitely we're going to go through some, obviously, Man versus Nature and Man in Dire Circumstances books as we go through some of these tales.
Yeah. Have you read any other books about like the American Indians?
Not any that come to mind. I want to read Last of the Mohegans
Oh, okay.
with you on in this series.
I read one, I forget what it's called, but it is a similar story in that, well, this one kind of follows more closely. There was an American woman who did get kidnapped as a child, but she fully assimilated with the Indians, and she got to the point where people tried to rescue her. She didn't want to get rescued. She had like husband, she had family. She fully went from like white settler to an Indian.
Yeah.
And so he followed that path.
What's that book?
I gotta look it up.
Because I read Empire. I'm now a couple coming to mind. Empire of the Summer Moon.
Say it again.
Empire of the Summer Moon. That's a book about the Comanche and like
Empire of the Summer Moon. Yeah.
And her son becomes half white, half Indian.
Right.
Becomes a chief.
Yes.
Yes, we'll read that book.
Okay, so I have read that one before. So
yeah, I read that one too. I read it over COVID.
That one paints a different picture of this here. This book, I will say, paints a picture of Manifest Destiny differently than anything else. Whereas this book, I don't know what this author's background is, but it does seem like if he's not just a pure historian, if he was writing for feelings, then he might be like a pretty hardcore Christian, because it did seem like that Manifest Destiny was kind of pushed in this. And the way you were reading it, the way I was reading it was just like, yeah, this was inevitable. This was happening. This was an unstoppable force.
You took that on your own? That's what you got from his writing? Or that you think that's what he was pushing on you?
I took that from his writing.
I think that is what the people of the time thought a lot. That it's just
kind of had to
cultures, and because I don't think we really think of we don't think of people being superior to others nowadays, but I think that's kind of what they thought of, because near the end they thought like, oh, remember that passage about the mammoths died and the giant sloths died, because of evolution and progress of time, and now they're thinking, oh, the white colonists are taking over, and that Indians will die because of because of evolution. And
there was, part of Manifest Destiny is survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, call it fit by your own definition. But we had more people with more guns and more effective ways of destroying their native settlements.
Yeah, I think it all just came down to numbers, because there was some brutal fights both ways.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it just came down to, well, probably two things: disease and numbers.
Disease, numbers, and time. If you think about this book's period, what, 20 years, 30 years or so we covered? Kit Carson started out when he was in his late teens, and he died probably in his 50s, maybe 60s.
Yeah, it's probably the 20s, 1820s to end of the 1860s.
Yeah, so 30 years is actually a long time frame for like a constant effort to exterminate these people. Wasn't like, hey, the campaign happened in 4 years and it was done. It took, I mean, 30 years isn't a generation, but pretty close to a cycle.
And if you think about it, in the 1840s is when the Irish immigration happened. So not only are you growing a population in America, you're getting additional Europeans coming over, and they're pushing into Tennessee and Ohio and Western Pennsylvania, and it's pushing those people into Missouri, where Kit Carson started, and then trying to go out to California and Oregon.
Yeah, there's a little bit of
1849 is obviously the gold rush, which is right in the smack dab of this book.
There was a little bit of like a Shakespeare essence to it as well, where the Americans would pit in one Indian tribe against another, or a Mexican tribe against another, and they would kind of pit them against each other because their enemies go back, hundreds of years, and so you kind of use that. But I guess that's been the case for a long time, going back to even like the American Indian War with Britain on the East Coast here, where each tribe had, or the French and Indian War, I should say, where we were using Indians against each other, and that's just been going on, I guess, as long as settlements have been here.
Also, there's some tragic stories about one Indian tribe attacking a settlement, and then settlers just going out and attacking the next Indian tribe because they can't tell the difference between the Utes and the Pawnees. And
how couldn't you? Yeah, I mean, honestly, like,
and it's terrible, but you can kind of understand it.
Yeah, I don't know how you really could at that time. Maybe like a dialect was different or something was different about it. But I imagine that was very, very difficult to pick and choose one versus the other.
Yeah.
That's another thing, actually, that's kind of crazy about the story, too, is a guy like Kit Carson, like, he must have been a genius.
He must have been so smart.
He knew multiple languages, multiple dialects, was able to effectively communicate with all different types, and then his tracking skills and things like that, too.
How about and able to travel without, he just knows landmarks and direction, where to go, when to go. And two people survive in the Southwest United States in the 1800s must have been so hard. And you think, this is how you find water. This is how you find food. This is what plants you can eat. This is what plants you can't eat. This is what tribes to avoid and when to avoid them. This is how when they're traveling.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how he made his life. And the amount of his friends just died because they weren't as good, or he's a titan of the American West, and I think I appreciate this book that pays credence to that.
I do too. I wish he kept a journal.
Yeah,
his journal.
You felt like it was like too much secondhand accounts of what he did, and
not only secondhand accounts, but like. And the author did a good job, because again, I just feel like the information was so limited, but I felt like he was reaching for this information. Like, he was writing a lot of times what seemed like firsthand accounts. There's no chance he was getting firsthand accounts of like these people and these people dying. So it seemed just like he was stretching things pretty thin.
I think he was stretching more the breadth of the narrative more than stretching the content of the Kit Carson stories. Like, there's the whole part about the Civil War that doesn't involve Carson. They're like, okay, I understand that this is happening, but this could be one chapter instead of four.
Another story altogether. Yeah.
Or another story altogether. It's like one of those things when you're in high school and you're like, you need to be 10 pages and you got 8.
Yeah. None of the other characters, like Fremont, I think was his name.
Yeah.
None of them really resonated with me.
Yeah, him and Fremont were boys in the beginning.
Yeah.
Fremont was like the guy.
Well, this guy Kit Carson seemed like boys with, like, he seemed like a loyal dog. Like, if he was loyal with you, if he was boys with you, then he would do kind of whatever you ask.
Also, he's kind of that guy who's on your team. Like, hey, we got like the Mahomes. Like, hey, we got Mahomes on our team. We got a shot.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's like, all right, we're saddling up with Carson. We'll be all right.
You could call Mahomes. You could call it Ethan Hunt, like Mission Impossible. Like, just send Kit Carson. He'll get it done.
Yeah, which is, I think that story's pretty cool. It's just they strayed when Hampton side strayed from that. They kind of lost the propulsion of the book.
Yeah, I just don't think there's just enough about Kit Carson.
Yeah.
His
I feel
family wasn't white either. They were a mixed family too, so I bet that probably had something to do with it, where the kids were probably just carrying on more with him and kept to themselves. Because he had a bunch of kids, you would think at least some of them. And I think when he died, I think they said his two sons who came to see him were like, I think it said 12 and 7, something
yeah.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah, so you would have thought that maybe they would have, I don't know, recollected, saw the value, and taken some notes about dad, whatever. But
I still think they're probably still trying to survive. Like even in that, like
that's a
the
good
next
point. Also.
generation.
Yeah, like you didn't have the time to just sit down and write a book.
Yeah, because there's no running water.
Yeah.
No, so speaking of like the Ethan Hunt and kind of like the guy can get it done, I just highlighted this passage. I want to share it. This is Army commander giving Carson an assignment. Perhaps inevitably, that person was Carson. Throughout his career, this was precisely the sort of assignment on which he had thrived. Focused, small scale, it was an undertaking with huge stakes and no room for error. A rescue mission that was also a courier mission. That's when you take the notes about the West,
Yeah.
cross country to DC.
Yeah, and just think about that assignment. So you're in New Mexico, and you're a general. You say, hey, Kit Carson, take 50 guys, walk across the country, bring these letters to Washington, D.C., and, fight off or find these Indians as well. I'll hear back from you in 3 months if we're successful.
Who knows if I'll hear back from you?
Yeah, if I hear back from you in 3 months, we'll see. My thought behind that is like, okay, so you make that decision as like a general. How do you make the next decision? Do you make the next decision assuming that decision worked? Or do you have to make the next decision thinking that, okay, we just did something that's a 50-50 shot, if that?
I think you'd be like, that was a Hail Mary. Let's work on the other things.
Everything was a Hail Mary.
Everything. Your life is a Hail Mary. I also
Did this make you want to visit like New Mexico area, Texas Panhandle, Arizona? I'd be curious to kind of see some of these old like Pueblo type villages out there.
It
and
seems
just
like
to
a lot
see.
of desert. It seems like a lot of desert.
I know, but there's also a lot of snow too. So I'm thinking if you went like
Yeah.
to city, you might. There's a surprising amount of snow
A surprising amount of snow in New Mexico.
for New Mexico. Yes.
Well, they talk about how it was like floating islands, like the tops of the mountains were all lush and green, and then
Yeah.
the valleys were actually all barren and dry.
Yeah.
Because I think the Rockies go into New Mexico, and there
Oh
are
yeah, for sure. I mean, that's where like they talked about. I forget which trail. Maybe it was the Oregon Trail that cut through the north. That was so hard to get through and initiate, where they had to go in and stop because it was winter, and then eventually they broke through. That cuts through a big past the Rockies. Did you look in the first? I only noticed it when I was done reading the book. At the first like opening of the cover, there's a map.
There's a map, yeah.
And the map shows the different trails. Yeah, I didn't actually, and I was wondering that through the whole book. I was like, now where is Santa Fe actually? Where is Taos? Where are these areas that they're talking about?
I'm pro map in books. I like having it. Even Gates of Fire had a map too.
Yes.
That
was like back of the napkin.
Yeah. Biggest drawback of the Kindle is it's not easy to access the map.
Oh yeah, I forgot your Kindle. Yeah, that's a killer.
It sucks with any fancy book that need a map, any large scale book.
Yep.
That's the biggest drawback of the Kindle.
Yeah, that's a check one for reading the actual book. Downside, this was a thick book.
Yeah, it was a thick for a week. It was a toughie.
Thick, yeah. How long did it actually take you to read it start to finish?
Well, we missed last Wednesday morning because my little guy was sick. So I think he gave whatever he had to my wife. I think it took me like the full 6 or 7 days. Like I was running.
Yeah, I was probably in the because I did read it fully. There wasn't like a flyby reading. Yeah, it was like 2 weeks, and one of those readings was an hour long on the train and an hour long back. It took me a while to get through it.
Yeah, we went house hunting this weekend. Actually, my son's first birthday this weekend.
I had that on my calendar.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys sent me Natasha's birthday, so just so I have it in mind.
No, we'll do.
April
4/24.
4/24.
Yeah, 4/24/24.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, if we move out here, I'll have an hour and a half to read in the mornings and at night. So it's just like something that I thought didn't share with my wife because it's not on her priority list.
For a book like this too, I almost like need the physical book because if I'm just on the Kindle doing like this nonstop, there's just no end in sight.
Yeah, but I like to carry it with you.
Yeah, that makes
it goes
sense.
everywhere.
Yes. But it's not a book where you can just pick up and read a couple pages and feel good about it.
That is interesting. I love those books where you can drop it for 2 days. You read like the sentence before, you're like, okay, I know exactly where I am. This book, you're going back 5 pages. You're like, what is happening in Fremont, Narbo?
Names, you lose track of everything. Yeah.
Manolito.
Fortunately, nothing was that important in the pages where if you miss 3 or 4 pages, you're not really missing much.
Yeah. There's no like, it's not the 3x structure where it's, enters a new world, finds a challenge, overcomes challenge. It's not like it's just like a progression of Western expansion. It's just a slow tide rising higher and higher.
Slow tide, yeah.
I'm trying to think. There's a couple more. Carson did write an autobiography. But
really?
didn't he write it? He wrote the autobiography, and then the guy who helped him write it turned it into a biography. And gave him no royalties.
Yeah, I do remember reading that where I think this guy took a lot from that actually, because that was the only autobiography or biography that there was. But yeah, there was a talk, I guess, towards the end of the book where they spoke about that a little bit.
Yeah. What's Carson's autobiography called?
Yeah.
It just mentions Carson said it in his autobiography.
Oh, it just
the Cheyenne were plotting to kill him. Then and there, along with those members of his party, they did not choose to kidnap. This is Carson talking. I understood them to say that while I was smoking and not on my guard, they could easily kill me with a knife. He writes, As for the Mexicans with me, they could kill them as easily as buffalo. You're constantly in enemy territory.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And not just in enemy territory, but communicating with them, working with them. Imagine like walking with 50 people and you've just got a trail of Indians like on your shoulder, basically. They could attack at any time. They could leave you alone at any time. You're just in a constant state of like worry and potential panic.
Yeah, they talk about the Canyon de Chile, and it's the Navajo base. Like there's some pretty cool. If I was reading this as a screenwriter, I'd be like, I could get inspiration in this for like a new sci-fi thing, like explore in a new land.
Yeah,
this is like
the American West is pretty. I don't want to say it's overdone, but there's a lot out there.
Oh,
movie-wise, TV show-wise, South American West.
Oh yeah, it's probably as close to, other than Columbus and Cortez, alien invasion or exploring alien lands as we have in world history.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, if you talk about the amount of land too, like the amount of space, because this kind of started, let's call like St. Louis, the jump-off point.
Yeah.
And then west of St. Louis was open. West of St. Louis is huge.
It's still a lot. Like if you look at the national parks, it's like, oh my god, this is so big.
Yeah,
like the size of my home state.
And that kind of got me too when they were talking about the areas of the reservations. They said, "Oh yeah, we just carved out a little piece. It was the size of Delaware."
Yeah,
Delaware's a state
with a lot of people living in it.
And then the second one that they did, like back towards their more homeland, I forgot how big they said that was, but I don't think it was Ohio, but they said it was like huge, whatever expansive land they had then.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was like, it didn't count. It wasn't the size of their original range. It didn't include the 4 mountains that they hold, but it was the size of.
Yeah, state.
Let's just say Massachusetts or something like that.
It does make me curious now also to see Well, not in a good way either, but all right. So this is like, let's just call it 1860. So the Indians are going to the reservation. I don't think they had a good time after that.
No, I they the disease
Yeah.
pretty brutal.
Yeah, they just
Well,
they,
because
they
then also all your life, like the buffalo are dying.
yeah, it's like the American zoo. Like you put an animal in the zoo, sure it lives, but is it actually living? I don't know. Is it
Yeah,
thriving? Certainly not.
I don't think there's many positive outcomes of Indian reservations in American history.
I, I would say not. And what's funny was, well, not funny, but I think I finished this book Monday and I turned the Chiefs game on. And for the game, they've got the Chief like banging the jug and everyone doing this. I'm like, oh, I kind of get it now. This is kind of offensive.
Yeah, I get it. I get the offensive, but like I also get the hey, you don't name your team after something winning. You want to
Oh
name your
yeah, no.
team after
If
something
I was
cool.
like a Blackhawk, I would be psyched.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
and who was on last night? Central Michigan was in the football game last night.
Chippewa.
Yeah, the Chippewa was.
Yeah, I think it's cool like having it. I think like the Florida State Seminoles. I think having the actual tribe is pretty cool.
Yeah, Seminoles, cool.
Um,
It's also funny
Also,
to think about that too, because like, so the American West was like the last stronghold of the American Indians, because in our southeast, like
oh,
Andrew
brutal,
Jackson's been destroying them since like the 1820s, and they've
brutal.
been on for a long time in the American East. So the American West was like their last fallback stronghold.
Yeah, I don't really. Oh, the other Indian book I thought of was King Philip's War, or it's either called King Philip's War or Mayflower. I don't. It's Nathaniel Philbrick. I don't know if Mayflower talks about King Philip's War or that's a whole nother book entirely, but that's a good one about uh, the colonists fighting the Indians before, like the Americans became colonies.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
read a
actually
book.
the deadliest war per capita participants in American history. It was just brutal.
I read a
Brutal.
book on like a biography of Andrew Jackson, which covers a lot of it. And part of me thinks that maybe not, but like a Bill O'Reilly or Martin Dugard, his killing books. I don't know why. A part of me thinks there might have been a killing of the American Indian,
Oh, I
but
bet there is.
maybe not. If there was, I read it. If not, then I'm just mixing it in with another book that I read. But yeah, it's really interesting to me how it started over there, or the big change was the development of our weapons. So being able to have a gun that could shoot multiple times,
The
like
six
changed
shooter was yeah
the history.
The Colt
Yeah.
revolver was a game changer. They talk about that a lot
Because
in
prior
Empire.
to that, you're standing there shooting one gun, reloading it, and you've got an Indian who's riding a horse like he's attached to it,
Yeah,
firing arrows in rapid
and
succession.
you're a pincushion in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then there's a book about like the Iroquois and the Huron that's pretty good, uh, like upstate New York and
Mhm.
Vermont and upper Pennsylvania and Ohio. But do you notice a lot of like Greek mythology references in the book?
Give
I
me
wrote
one.
down for you Sisyphus. Okay. I know this is from the Odyssey. Scylla and Charybdis, like the whirlpool and the monster that
It did talk
Odysseus
about the Odyssey a good amount. Yep.
talk about Thermopylae, the hot gates,
Yep.
about the canyon, Mercury, the messenger,
I did notice that.
and then Theseus. So I think he's kind of creating this as an American mythology, like myth story, which is kind of
Oh yeah,
interesting. He's
that for
creating that
sure.
connection.
Yes. Yeah, I did get that impression also, where this was our, American Odyssey.
Yes.
It would have been better if there was just more from Odysseus over there, Kit Carson here. There just wasn't enough Kit Carson. Like he just didn't have enough stories to tell. And
Yeah.
again, I think it's because this author didn't want to exaggerate. He didn't
Yeah.
want to like do what other people had done, which
Embellish.
make up stories and embellish. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about? Okay, so how do you? This is a first nonfiction? Uh, are you lean more fiction, more nonfiction? How do you feel like the narrative for review and differs between reading a fiction book?
I like to mix up nonfiction and fiction. I like
Yeah.
to kind of go back and forth. Nonfictions tend to be the ones where I'm not going to read again.
Yeah.
I don't think I would. I don't think that I would read this book again. Glad I read it once. Very interesting. I'm interested in reading about more about little pieces of it, but reading this book again, I would have no interest in doing so.
Like if there's a magazine article about Kit Carson's uh overnight journey to San Diego, you'd read that.
Honestly, I might go get the James Polk biography.
Interesting.
Yeah,
See from his perspective.
that kind of got me a little bit.
Very interesting.
And I'm sure there will be a book that maybe we could jump on about like the Pony Express.
Mm-hmm.
That would be pretty cool.
Also, what great opening line. We've been kind of hammering this guy, but great opening line that this was a time before outlaws because there were no laws.
That is kind of cool.
That's great.
Yeah, it's the American West before the American West. It is as raw and bare as you could get. That did set the stage for some awesome stuff. But again, I think that contributed to just like the lack of information.
Okay.
You're not like, even if you do, so you rest in the middle of the night, it's not like you're sitting around the campfire typing on your laptop. You're hopefully going to sleep, but you're barely sleeping because there's Indians around you and wolves around you. And
yeah, that one guy got scalped in the middle of the night.
Scalped in the middle of the night. There was one guy who got bitten by like a rattlesnake while he was just lying on the ground, like nightmare stuff.
Yeah, it is nightmare stuff.
Yeah, so I don't think I would read this one again, but as a first nonfiction, it was good. It was an interesting topic. It was a cool time period.
All right, let's give our score. Let's pick the next book, and then we can do some wrap up with other stuff going on.
Yeah, if we're on a 1 to 10 list, this is
all right. So do you want to just? I'm going to write down my score. I don't want to be influenced because we've had two scores that have been pretty close.
Yeah,
I'm going to write down mine. So we won't be influencing each other's scores.
I'm a 3.
Oh, super low.
Yeah, like 1 to me would be, hey, I tried to read this book and couldn't get through it. I'd say this was
and 10 is must read, like pick it up tomorrow.
10 is must read over and over again.
Yeah.
So this, because I wouldn't read it again and because it was tough to read through, I'd give it a 3.
Wow. I think so your connection with Gates of Fire, this is not my Gates of Fire, but that you would like, oh, I would like live in this world, I would be part of the Spartans. I kind of have a little bit of that with like the American West.
Crazy. I would much rather be in Greece in the year like 500 BC than I think I would be in the American West.
I romanticize the American West frontiersman more than as I don't know if because there is like the no running water, the brutal
food. Like the only food you're eating is like dried buffalo for like weeks, and it's hot and can you imagine too? Like they were big drinkers. Imagine being hungover.
Do you what I think? And it's so lame. They take their boots off and they just have no socks on, so their feet are probably
feet are mangled. I think of that. Like they booze a lot, so they're hungover. They smoke all the time, so you've got that awful cotton mouth going.
Yeah,
but like your oasis, if you find it, is like a shed next to another shed, and that's like an oasis. I
ran down your score. So 3.
Yeah.
All right.
I have zero fantasies. I guess because I'm not like an adventurer to begin with. I would have zero desire. I would definitely still be on the East Coast. I would not care about gold. Like I would have no interest in seeing the Pacific.
Looking for a bacon, egg, and cheese.
I mean, it's 2024. I've only seen the Pacific, I think, once.
I think I did. I've been out there a couple of times, but I gave it a 7-1. I liked it. I liked the West story. I thought the first half and then the fourth made up for a tough third.
Let's down the line. We've got a good amount of books in between, but let's throw something on the list in the future during this time period also.
Okay,
I'd be interested in like a Pony Express type story. I think that
I'm writing down Pony Express. I'm writing down Polk.
Yeah, I think that would be.
We'll look up 2 of those books. And Polk. And then I'll just write down like 1830s to 1870s. Just do something like that. Well, we'll do Killer Angels.
There's
We'll do
probably a
Killer Angels
decent one.
eventually.
There's probably one, maybe David McCullough did one about like the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad.
Oh, and it's definitely an Oregon Trail book too.
Oregon Trail book, yeah. Yeah, there's a
Well,
lot that we could uncover in this space, but I need time before we revisit it.
Agreed. All right. And then reading list. Let's just go loading. So we did first book was Hunt for October, second book Gates of Fire, third book Blood and Thunder. We have Casino Royale up next week.
Perfect transition.
I've already finished it.
I could do so today if I wanted to. Yeah.
Okay, so we're good with that. Following Casino Royale, let's rattle them off. Plum Island, Band of Brothers, The Firm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've suggested The Firm. You want to pick the book after The Firm, so we have 5 on deck?
Yeah, at that time, let's go with one of the Bill O'Reillys that we were decided on from the list.
Bill O'Reilly. Let's just do a different. You want to do Killing Jesus?
Oh, okay. I didn't actually. That's the only one I haven't read.
Fantastic. I kind of like let's do Killing, because if we do Killing Lincoln, you're kind of back in this era a little quickly.
This era, yeah. The only era I was thinking that we have. Killing England was 1776, but we're reading 1776 anyway down the road. Reagan was the 1980s. I'm sure we'll pick something else up in that time period.
Hunt for October, but
yeah, true. Okay, yeah. Why not? Killing Jesus sounds cool.
Awesome. A little Pontius Pilate.
Yeah, I'm curious actually because I haven't read that, and that was one of the first ones I think.
Okay. Awesome. And then I have a couple put one. Killing Floor, the first Jack Reacher book I have on. I added to the list.
Good.
And then yeah. All right. You want to do Giants Yanks, or you just want to shut this episode off and?
So trade deadline just passed in the NFL. Giants did nothing. Okay.
I did not want to
do nothing. No. There are 9 teams, I believe, with 2 wins.
Yes.
That's not great. There is not a single person in this draft who I think will make enough of a difference on the Giants.
Yeah.
So I'm back to the stage, which I've been at many, many times, where you hope for the number 1 pick, you hope to trade it, and you hope to build something.
Right there with you. My only fear is everyone else knows there's no stud in this draft, so no one else will come up to trade for number 1.
Everyone always does. Yep, I thought that too. And not only that, I was just talking about this with somebody else. The Giants, even though they've sucked for a decade, they're still a franchise where season tickets are like sold out. There's a waiting list. You get people coming to games. There's still prime times. Compare it to Las Vegas.
Correct.
New team, new franchise. They need a superstar.
I don't think Vegas would be that bad if they got a quarterback.
No, and that's what I'm saying. If they would trade up to get Shadur Sanders, like that reinvigorates that franchise. I say the Browns are in the same boat. The Browns need not just like a player and a good player, but a superstar. So there are players who would move up for the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah,
or there are teams that would move up.
I would trade back, get the best player, and try and sign Jameis or Flacco. I would take Flacco for a year. I honestly would.
I would trade back and try and take somebody who more fits Dable.
You still want to get a quarterback?
In the draft, yes, but I would be all right with a free agent. I just don't think of any free agent quarterbacks out there who fits Dable's system. Because what fits Dable's system, unfortunately, is Daniel Jones, but just a better version of Daniel Jones.
Which is Josh Allen.
Correct.
So you just don't like the quarterbacks in this draft? Or
definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely not. The only one, honestly, who I would consider, but definitely not early in the first round, would be Jalen Milroe from Alabama.
I kind of want to watch Cam Ward, the Miami quarterback, a little bit more.
Good enough. Yeah, he is good. He's fun to watch. Miami's just crushing people. I don't trust him as a pro.
This is also a bigger discussion for maybe our next. It's hard to watch college football weekly when you know there's a 12-team playoff they can just tune into at the end of the year.
I would agree with that only because Saturdays are kind of taken up, and to
100%.
sit down and watch football all day Saturday and then all day Sunday is tough.
Yeah.
But I do, like, I was watching the college football game last night.
Yeah.
It's Tuesday night. Nothing else was on.
For sure.
Election, sure. Yeah. I mean, presidential election might have been on, but it's the first night of action also. So,
what do you got?
We're slipping back and forth.
Back and forth. I don't even know if I want to talk Yankees.
Yankees just sign Juan Soto. If you sign Juan Soto, I'm still a fan. If you don't, I'm going to have trouble with this team.
You don't want to address what happened in the 5th inning?
No, absolutely not. Because that's who they were. It was the team, and we shouldn't have expected anything different.
They are who we thought they were.
They weren't going to win that series anyway. They were down 3-1. There wasn't like magic sauce in this team like there was in the 04 Red Sox. They weren't that team. So even if they win that game, it's just delaying the inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a reason why I have it. I sent texts to multiple guys. I sent texts in our Yankee group chat. I'm not believing in this team until they win 2 games in the ALCS.
My thought was,
when you enter playoffs as the number 1 seed, your fan base is like, let's go. We can make a run. Let's do it. If your fan base is saying you need to win 5 playoff games before I start to believe in you, that's an issue.
So I had the same thing, except mine was 2 games in the ALCS, or if it's the Astros, I won't believe until they win 4 games in the ALCS.
That's totally fair.
And that's why this season, not that it hurts, but I feel like they didn't really accomplish anything because, yeah, they got to the championship, but they still didn't get the bugaboo off their back. They didn't beat the Astros.
No.
A lot of people are saying they didn't beat a good team.
Honestly, if they lost in 6 or 7, I would have said they got the bugaboo off their back.
If that went to 6.
Well.
Yep, if that went to 6.
But they played poorly.
Yep.
I'm just worried the Dodgers are going to come back with Ohtani pitching now healthy, and then Glass now healthy, and then a couple guys back, and they're going to be absolute superstars.
Shohei, Glass now, Walker Buehler, Yamamoto,
Kershaw. I don't know. Some people think Kershaw's washed up, but I think he's still pretty good. But
whatever. Yeah. Sure, Kershaw.
As a 4th starter, 5th starter?
Yeah, it's a 4th or 5th. That's insane. And now they're looking at this other Japanese guy.
Pitcher or 3rd baseman?
Pitcher, I think.
Okay. Well, just sign Soto.
Sign Soto. That's the only thing you need to do right now. I'll figure out everything else after that. Sign Soto. It seems like they're not signing Torres, so bye-bye Glaber. But just sign Soto.
I don't want Glaber back. I was Glaber's biggest fan as a prospect first 2 years. People forget he was at short for a year. It was terrible. He doesn't hustle. He doesn't play good second base. He hits okay. People think he's like the 3rd best hitting second baseman in the league. I can't believe that. If that's true.
I hope that's not true. No way. There can't be. Isn't Luis a rare area for second baseman?
And who's the guy on the Braves pretty good? And Ketel Marte.
Yeah, no, there's got to be much better second baseman.
Yeah. I don't want Glaber back. If he's making $20 million a year, just give that money to Soto.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
And to be fair, they didn't sign Yamamoto last year when they tried to, and that was $30 million a year for 10 years or whatever.
The money doesn't matter. I've said from a long time, half joking, half not. 15 years, $1 billion. Just get Juan Soto if you need to. If he's a Met, that's going to be worse than. Yeah, I think it's going to be worse than Saquon as an Eagle.
Oh yeah, way worse because the Yankees are competing right now. The Giants aren't competing.
Yeah.
I don't care that the
NFL running back, I only have to deal with Saquon for like 4 years tops. Soto, you have to deal for like 15 years.
Also, I know there's one Eagle fan in my family, and there's a couple in our fantasy league. That's not that many. I work with like all Mets fans.
Yeah, Mets fans are brutal. Let's cross our fingers and hope.
It would be so much worse. It would be way worse than
that would be worse.
All right, good episode. We got
Send it there. We'll pick up Casino Royale next week, which
Casino
I'm excited
Royale
because that's a
next
fun
Wednesday
one.
morning. All right. Take it easy,
Bye,
buddy.
bud.
All right.
See ya.